Hello. Today we go to Bolivia, to the site Tiwanaku. And Tiwanaku is closely located to the border of Peru. The yellow dot represents, here on this map, the site of Tiwanaku. And the dashed line represents the equator. This next slide shows the map of Tiwanaku, the town of Tiwanaku, and the three ancient sites closely located to the town of Tiwanaku: Kalasasaya, Acapana, and Pumapunku. Here you see the orientations that we measured. Kalasasaya is slightly counterclockwise oriented. I will explain later why we think what caused this. Then Acapana slightly clockwise oriented, and Pumapunku slightly more clockwise oriented. And what we discovered is that this pattern follows the rhythm of the poles on the northern hemisphere. Tiwanaku's buildings are oriented to the South Pole, and the South Pole also moved in the same way as the North Pole, but with the difference is that the South Pole was much more steady. So the movements of the geographical poles on Antarctica were much smaller. Tiwanaku is located 16.5 degrees beneath the equator, so it is located on the southern hemisphere, and because Kalasasaya is cardinally oriented, it is by definition oriented to the South Pole, and that is very important to understand this nuance. Here you see a photo from Kalasasaya. It seems on first glance that Kalasasaya is divided into two different structures: a large square and a smaller square seemingly built on top of the larger square. We will later in this video examine if this is true. Here you see the large square and here you see the small square. Kalasasaya is slightly counterclockwise rotated, minus 0.3 degrees. The most probable cause of this little anomaly is the restlessness of the South American plate. Here you see recent GPS measurements of the South American plate, and by looking at the arrows you see the direction in which the plate moves and rotates. And what is very interesting is that the rotation of the plate is opposite to the rotation of both the sites Acapana and Pumapunku. And that means there is another force than only plate tectonics. And this force are the crustal deformations that are responsible for the rotations of these both sites. And that means that Kalasasaya is the youngest of these three sites. Acapana is older than Kalasasaya, and Pumapunku is older than Acapana. And these patterns follow the crustal deformation directions of the poles that we have discovered. Our observations are confirmed by the extent to which the buildings were buried. This satellite footage of 1972 shows the difference between Acapana and Kalasasaya. Acapana is totally buried underneath large amount of soil, while Kalasasaya is clearly visible. Here are some old photos from Kalasasaya. Kalasasaya was uncovered, while Acapana was still totally covered. Maybe even they thought it was just a hill, and then later they found that it was also an ancient site. At that time, Pumapunku was not even visible. It was totally buried underneath a large amount of soil. So this pattern confirms the orientation patterns. The more clockwise they are oriented, the deeper they were buried underneath soil. And these two patterns match. So the older structure, the deeper they are buried. Here's some recent research about the buildup of soil. The rate to which soil builds up depends a little bit of location, latitude and climate and so on. To build up about 40 inches, so around 1 meter of soil, takes between 50,000 to 100,000 years. So it is a myth to believe that if a site needs to be excavated of, let's say, 80 or 100 inches of soil, it can be a few thousand years old. That is simply impossible. This series of videos about Tiwanaku, very ancient and very intriguing site, solves some of the big and main questions. If you want to watch the full video, please go to my Patreon page and become my patron. It would be very nice to meet you there.